Hearing the budget meeting to order at 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. This is a special called meeting of the Newnan City Council for the purpose of public hearing that I will open at this time for the fiscal year 2020 budget for the city of Newnan. I'm going to call on City Manager Cletus Phillips to present his findings on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, good evening. I'm going to run through a presentation of some of the highlights featured into the proposed 2020 budget of the City of Newnan. The first thing I'd like to point out is for the 30th year, we received a Distinguished Budget Award by the Government Finance Office Administration. That 30th year was actually in 2019. So we'll be submitting this 2020 for our 31st consecutive year award. So a lot of hard work goes into meeting those standards of that award. So a lot of kudos to staff for putting that document together. And it's meant to be a transparent document that's a budget message to our constituents. Start with some of the general fund highlights. As you know, our general fund is our primary operating account, our main operating account of the City of Newnan. It is a balanced budget. The budget is proposed for 2020 at $27,145,600. It is based on no millage rate tax increase. The projections are conservative. They're about 95% of the current year revenue. Overall, it's about a 4.6% increase from 2019. Some of the big highlights, that include 6 new employees. There is a 12% pay adjustment within public safety, 5% overall pay adjustment, 10% increase in health insurance, and a 15% increase in retirement contributions. And I'm going to go into some of these numbers in a little more detail in just a minute. Some of the major revenue changes, local option sales tax, that first category, lost, as we will commonly refer to it, is the largest single revenue source in the City of Newnan. You'll see that later. And we are budgeting for the largest overall revenue increase in that category at $500,000. You can see there are some categories at the bottom where we have budgeted a slight decrease for the year, such as the occupational taxes and the cable franchises. Obviously, cable franchise, along with telephone franchises, are decreasing because of newer ways of actually watching television and using phones. On the expense side, largest changes obviously is each year our largest changes in wages. You can see there just under $900,000. Health insurance at $362,000. Going down to the bottom, you can see that there were some decreases in some of the major expenditure categories. We've eliminated the transfer to the street fund this year in the general fund because we do have the 2019 SPLOS that includes a budget allocation for street repairs and maintenance. This is just a 5-year history of our overall general fund budget. Again, I want to point out that it is based on no tax increase. There were no reserves that were used to balance the budget. And again, it's about a 4.6% increase from the previous year. You can see the trend line there over the past 5 years. This is a chart that you've probably seen several times, and I like to show it. It can be a little confusing at first, but if you actually just pay attention to the two colors, anytime that you see the orange line on top of the blue line are the years that the City of Newnan took the rollback rate. This body, the elected officials of the City of Newnan, took the rollback rate in those years. In those years that you see the blue line, that is actually higher than the orange line were the negative years of the digest growth during the recession. And we could have taken a higher millage rate and it not been considered a property tax increase, but we elected not to do that. Anytime you see the orange line higher than the rollback are the years that we did adopt a millage rate increase. And since 2014, there have only been 3 years that were the case. So I think we have been very good stewards of the millage rate, and you can see that the millage rate has gone from 4.5 to 3.99 over the course of that term. General fund revenue, you can see that, again, as I stated in the earlier slide, it is a conservative projection of about 97% of 2019 estimated revenues. That's continuing with the trend that the city of Newnan has practiced for many years and has afforded us the ability to maintain in a very strong financial position. Here's a listing of the top 10 major revenue sources in the general fund. Again, you can see local option sales tax is our number one revenue source at just over $7.5 million. You see ad valorem property taxes at a number 2 at over $5 million. After that, you see a pretty significant decrease between the top 2 categories. These top 10 categories, interestingly enough, the order or the ranking of the top 10 have not changed for the last 4 years. So lost in property tax, occupational taxes, et cetera, remained in that order for the last 4 years. We do have a total of 57 revenue accounts, so our revenue is very diversified, even though those 2 are the primary accounts. Expenditures by function. This is very typical for local government, whether it's the city of Newnan or other cities across the state or even counties across the state. We are very heavily funded into the public safety, police, and fire. As you can see, 58% of our expenditures are for police and fire, which is a very critical role of the services that we provide to our constituents. If you break down the general fund expenditures by category, again, we're very heavy in people. You can see that 51% of our expenditures are wages and another 26% are benefits. So a total of 77% of our general fund expenditures are related to our personnel. If you break wages down, again, this is very common in a local government. We're very dependent upon full-time employees. About 96% of our wages are dedicated to full-time staff, and only smaller amounts, 2 and 1%, are dedicated to part-time and overtime and contractual labor. To talk a little bit more about the new personnel, I said there were 6 positions. These 6 positions include 2 personnel in the street department, 2 police officers, 1 firefighter, and 1 facility maintenance, for a total budget impact of just over $440,000, and that does include salary, benefits, vehicles, and all tools or equipment associated with the positions. You will probably see a focus from my department over the next few years in that street department. As our infrastructure does start to age in parts of the city of Newnan, and we haven't really added a lot of staff in the public works street department, so that will be a focus of mine, and I've relayed that information to our department heads over the last couple of years. So you may see more of that in the next few years if the budget allows. Pay adjustments. Deputy Chief LaChance and Deputy Chief Cooper who are here tonight, they did an excellent job of presenting me with a study showing the starting pays across different agencies nearby. Some of those pay adjustments started, I think, with the Georgia State Patrol offering a pretty significant pay adjustment. Then it went into some of the larger cities, and then a large number of our surrounding jurisdictions have offered starting pay increases. So in order to remain competitive, I am proposing a starting pay adjustment for both police officers and firefighters. We're currently just over $36,000, and I'm proposing the starting pay for next year to be just over $40,000. The total budget impact is about $196,000. The budget does include a 5% on average pay raise for the remaining employees for a budget impact of about $730,000. A little bit about benefits. Again, benefits is a large portion of our budget, and you can see out of the benefits, about 57% of that is related to our health insurance. You can see where FICA, retirement, and workers' comp make up the remainder. Kind of a trend line on those 4 categories of benefits. That first column on the left is our health insurance trend line. You can see that's been spiking pretty quickly in the last few years. You can see that the other line categories are also increasing, but not as fast as health insurance. So you're aware that during the budget year 2020, we are going to be undertaking an exercise to look at some of our health care options. Obviously, that won't be effective for the 2020 budget year, but if we make any changes, it would be effective for the following budget year in 2021. So we're trying to get some answers to this issue related to health insurance. I always produce this chart for you. It just kind of shows our salaries and benefits as a portion of our budget. We're about at 77%. About 10 years ago, we were in the low 80s. We worked really, really hard to get that percentage a little lower so it would give us a little bit of flexibility in terms of economic downturn. When you're invested heavily in human capital, sometimes you don't have as many options, but because of the benefits cost and overall salaries, we're starting to creep back up. So that's something I'm trying to pay attention to, but it's kind of difficult to maintain that low 70%. I think 80% is a common number you will see in a lot of local government industries or organizations, I'm sorry. Here's another chart that I produced to you as employees per thousand. It really doesn't tell the whole story other than it shows that over the years we've been utilizing efficiencies, we've been utilizing technologies that we just don't staff up the way we used to. Employees per thousand, that's not the baseline we use, but we've been remaining consistent, about 7 employees for every 1,000 population. Major operating expenses, you can see there contractual services, repairs and maintenance are our 2 biggest operating expenses, but the red column is actually the 2020 and the blue column is 2019. You can see those actually decreased. So the operating expenses in this budget are actually less than they were in 2019. The increases are related to wages and benefits. You do see on the bottom line there, we have no debt service because we had no debt. But we do have 61 different expense categories. Pension status, you saw on the first page, I think there was an increase in our pension contributions, but I know there's a lot of numbers there, but the one thing I do want to point out, it still remains very well funded at 81%. There's been some questions about should we try to, fund it higher, and my response is that the GMA program does a very good job of looking into the future to making sure that we are well funded. And I've often said this before, if you're funded at 100%, you're overfunded because the chance of all eligible retirees leaving tomorrow is not going to happen. So 80%, and Mayor Brady, who served up there on that position for a long time, could probably agree with 80% still a pretty strong funded position. A little bit about all the funds. Leaving the general fund aside and talk a little bit about all the different funds. $42,500,000 budget. It is a 7% increase from 2019. This actually fluctuates quite a bit depending upon the level of capital projects that you're doing. If capital remains pretty consistent from year to year, this will remain somewhat consistent with a small increase. If I were to go back over a 10-year history at the time, like for example, when we were building the University of West Georgia campus, that number would actually have been higher. 2013 SPLOST, we're about to finish up all the projects in that particular fund. We only have some remaining money for street improvement projects. That's why the budget is substantially decreased. 2019 SPLOST, we're on our 2nd year. We didn't spend much money last year because it was the initial year of collection, and we typically utilize a pay-as-you-go financing. So therefore, with some money in the bank, we have allocations for the link and for some additional parks. So we got about a $9 million budget for 2019 SPLOST. Impact fee fund budget, again, this varies based upon the capital projects and the collections of impact fees. Impact fees can be slow to collect at times. And again, as you utilize the pay-as-you-go financing, if funds aren't on hand, we typically don't budget. Therefore, that's why the up and down chart there. Sanitation fund, the last 3 years is when we introduced the downtown sanitation fund. Obviously, we do include a $140,000 transfer out of the general fund to supplement the downtown sanitation program. This year, the budget is less because we have no capital expenditures. We're not buying any of the big boom trucks that you see that service your yard debris and your bulk that you put out in front of your house. We get about 10 years out of those trucks. And the 4 frontline trucks that we have in service are all 2013 or newer, so we're in pretty good shape. Our reserves are a little older, but there's no capital, thus the lower budget for sanitation. Hotel motel tax fund, this is reflective of the increase from hotel motel tax from 5 to 8, creation of the tourism group. Mr. Shell, you have a question?
How much of that is increased to that? How much, I know we got at least one new hotel coming online, and I'm not sure of any more.
Yeah, we have one that will be coming online.
300 or so thousand, probably of the tax increase.
Yeah, of the total budget of 1.16 million, you can see there's a breakdown on the bottom. Three there's 8 pennies. 3 of those pennies comes to the City of Newnan General Fund. 2 of those pennies, which equals $292,000, is budgeted for the Newnan Center. And then the new additional 3% is going to generate approximately $426,000. And in this particular budget, that is split half between tourism product development and the new tourism group, which the name is Explore Newnan Coweta, and I think you have an appointment on your other agenda tonight for that. So about $400,000 for the new tax. Total capital budget there, you can see we're about at $12 million. That includes 23 projects through 6 different funds. This is my last slide, and this is a very interesting slide. I know it's kind of hard to read up there, and I do this from year to year. Just a little similar city comparison. I took 15 different cities around us in the metro area, South Metro area, that have similar populations and similar size budgets, and I looked and compared millage rates and budget per capita, and this is pretty interesting. City of Newnan millage rate's 3.99. The average millage rate of the 15 cities was 6.46. Budget per capita, the City of Newnan 2020 budget proposed is $682 per capita, and that's per person. The average of those 15 cities was $976. So again, millage rate, budgeting, I think we've been pretty good stewards of our tax dollars. Mayor?
Questions, anyone?
Yes, sir.
Question on the 12% pay increase for starting public safety.
Yes, sir.
Fire, police and fire. With that increase of 12%, what does that do for someone who is a second year police or fire?
Good question, Councilman Alexander. The budget does include pay adjustments for anyone that is not up to that level. So if they were hired last year, they will also get an adjustment. It isn't right if we hire a first-year officer that passes a second or third year. So there will be adjustments up the line to keep them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions from the council? This is a public hearing that we are having on the 2020 fiscal year budget for the City of Newnan. This is your opportunity, if you are here tonight, to attend this public hearing on the budget, to come forward and ask any questions of the council or of management, Mr. Phillips, that you would feel that you would like to ask at this time. Don't rush. Okay, I assume no movement means that no one here is wanting to ask any questions regarding the year 2020 budget for the City of Newnan. So I'm going to close the public hearing at this time and thank everyone for being here. And we will have our regular meeting that will start in 12 minutes, 6:30. Thank you for attending.